Hello and welcome to a live edition of the Tailgate. We are coming from you from Indianapolis, the NFL Combine. I am joined by Pat Leonard from the Daily News, and joined by my colleague Ralph. Ralph, can you tweet this out, please?
Yeah, I got that.
So we get more people following us.
So if you're not watching it already, now you know where to go to watch it. Right?
Good call, a good call. Let's talk a little Giants. How's that sound, guys?
Sounds good.
Lots
to talk about today.
A lot to talk about. New GM, Joe Schoen, took to the podium. He was talking about how they need to get to $40 million their payroll. How are they going to do that?
It's a good question. I mean, and you have to get $40 million off the salary cap just to be operational, to afford your draft class and the practice squad and have injuries come up to pay your own players. That's not to be active in free agency. And if you want to do that, other than signing bargain basement players, you need to probably clear a little bit more. He talked all along about tough decisions. I mean, there are guys like James Bradbury, a cornerback they could probably use, who makes, what's his cap number, $21-something million. They got to find something to do with him, a trade or cut him. They don't have any tight ends on the roster, but they might have to cut the one they do have, Kyle Rudolph or Caden Smith, another one. A punter, Riley Dixon, he might have to be cut. Blake Martinez could be on the chopping block. A lot of familiar names. Granted, they're cutting from a bad team, but a lot of familiar names that could be productive players that may be gone in the next few days.
Yeah, what's so exciting or interesting about this Giants offseason to me is what Ralph's hitting on is almost every other day soon you're going to hear a big name that Giants,
they have to.
Yeah, like the Giants fans know, identify with, have their jersey. These are starters who are going to be cut from this team, traded from this team. I mean, Shane basically leaving the door open to trading Saquon Barkley, to everything, but to trading Saquon Barkley just gives you an example of how everything's on the table to do that, because that is such a large number you bring up, 40 million, and you have to start dipping into good players if you're talking about clearing that kind of money.
And he made it clear, listen, we want to be competitive this year, but we also have to build a foundation.
Right.
And you talked about, and you mentioned, he said everybody's there's not one person who's safe. Someone asked about Daniel Jones. He said he's our starting quarterback for now, but if you get rid of a guy like Saquon Barkley, what does that do for Daniel Jones?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the big problems. I mean, you want good players around your quarterback in a key year, but you also have to, they're going to need 4 starters probably on the offensive line, so they're going to have this money come from someplace. With Saquon Barkley is such an interesting one because he could be a great asset to Daniel Jones. He wasn't their best running back last year, so we're counting on him. We're counting him, becoming healthy and becoming that player. We're also talking about trading him. Who knows what his value is coming off a bad year with all his injuries and guaranteed $7 million.
Right, and an interesting player in that vein, it's a good question too, right? Like, how are you going to get better if you're trading your better players? Kadarius Toney sticks out to me as an interesting one who I know for a fact, there's commitment questions, there's work ethic questions, there's guys who thought he wasn't quite hurt every time he was out with an injury. And I know there were discussions about possibly getting rid of this guy who they just drafted in the first round last year. That said, Joe Schoen says today, I don't consider him a tradable piece. Now, why not if there are all these other issues behind the scenes? Well, to your point, if we want Daniel Jones to prove that he's the guy, and if we want to say we're putting our best foot forward offensively, how can you trade your most dynamic player on offense? And so those are the question marks. Like, you look at, if you made a Venn diagram for every player, even if there are a lot of negatives on a guy, if the positives can make you a better offense and win you some games, they do have to do this delicate balance of building for the future. But we all know from experience here covering the Giants every day, John Mara and Steve Tisch are tired of losing. The Giants fans are tired of losing. So they have to make the hard decisions for the future, but they just can't make all of those decisions because they have to look at, we need to win. We need to put people in the stands and in the seats.
You could make a case that what they need to do is what the Jets did, which is just burn it all to the ground, start over.
But are Giants fans willing to wait?
Well, Giants fans certainly aren't willing to wait, but the bigger issue is the owners. I don't think would allow that to happen.
Jets fans are used to, let's be realistic. Yeah. Jets aren't used to winning.
Right.
Their owners aren't used to winning quite yet.
Right.
That's fair.
How the Giants do that, though?
I don't think they can. I don't think the owners are deluding themselves to think they can be, a Super Bowl contender. Right. I think they might think they can get to the playoffs this year, which I don't know is necessarily realistic, but I think they believe that if we do things the right way, we've got the quarterback, we've got Saquon and whatever that they can get there. That's their expectation. But I don't think they would tolerate burning this to the ground. Let's go 2-15, get the number 1 pick in the draft, and start over with another quarterback. They want to evaluate on the fly.
Right. That quarterback question is such an interesting one to me, too, because they came out so strong and supported Daniel Jones at the introductory pressers. Now, it's still more likely he's the week 1 starter.
Who are you going to get?
Right. But, Daboll acknowledging they're meeting with all the quarterbacks. Shane saying that, listen, just because we have Daniel doesn't mean I'm not going to get blown away by a guy, and we are scouting them. And let's remember, they do have a lot of assets, and there are quarterbacks who may want out of some places who are intriguing names. So it's great to say we're committed to Daniel Jones, and yes, his cost effectiveness also is a part of that. But because we're thinking we got to win more games, and because there might be big names available, and let's just face it, one thing I like about Joe Shane is he's leaving doors open to everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you need to walk through all of them, but closing them now is silly. And so I like that they're leaving the option open to upgrade that position, because even if you're somebody who thinks Daniel Jones is a very good player who deserves a chance, there could be a quarterback available who is clearly better, who clearly makes you a better team right away. And even if if you get blown away by Malik Willis in the draft, you take the player.
Right.
So I like that they're leaving those doors open, and I think all of the factors of how they need to both build but also compete are factors in that.
Knowing
And they have the 5th and 7th pick.
Right. They certainly, chances are at 5, probably maybe at 7 too, you can get a quarterback. If you think one of them is the guy, you can draft him. It's another reason, the way he's leaving the door open, and the fact that the quarterback question is unanswered, it's another reason why I cannot imagine any scenario where they pick up Daniel Jones' 5th-year option, because I think they want to leave that door open. Now look, if he goes out and he shows that he is Aaron Rodgers, it's going to cost them a little more money when they franchise tag him for 2023.
Yeah, right.
But that's a small price to pay if you've found your guy.
Yeah.
It's much more important to have the flexibility of no more guaranteed money. Let's see what's, let's leave the door open that maybe we'll find somebody in the draft that we like as a project for next year. Maybe we find someone in the draft a year after. Maybe we just cleared money off the books and we find a free agent.
And I agree they shouldn't pick it up, but also it's not a decision they have to make today.
Right.
And these 2 months will go quickly, but he still has time to scout the draft quarterbacks and look at free agency and the trade prospects, and then could still pick it up if he finds out in the end that is the number 1 thing he can go with. But right now, there's no reason to do that and commit yourself to a player who you're still kind of on the fence about.
Yeah, and he said, he's my starting quarterback right now. Let's not pick up the option. But, Ralph, you talk about protecting Daniel Jones. You asked, Shane, about the O-line.
Right.
Because in order for Daniel Jones to be a good quarterback, he needs guys up front to protect him.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of interesting what Shane said when you asked him, do you have starting lineup for, the offensive line?
Right, is he looking for stars in the offensive line? So look, we only have 5 healthy linemen on the roster. I think it's kind of interesting because you can't go into the draft or free agency if you're the Giants looking at developmental guys. Getting a guy in the 5th round who you think is going to be a guy in the future does you absolutely no good. They have Andrew Thomas coming back. I don't know what else. Probably Shane Lemieux coming back if he's healthy. We don't know about Nick Gates. We don't know about. I don't think Matt Parrott is the answer.
Parrott,
No. They're obviously the right guard as a whole. So it could be 4 starters, which means they don't have the money in free agency. So you're looking at a vet prove it at 1 or 2 of those positions, but you almost certainly have to grab an offensive lineman in the 1st or 2nd round if you're expecting them to step right in and be a starter. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has 2 rookie starters on this line.
And they need it.
Yeah.
I mean, don't they have to?
Yeah, I'm interested in two things. Number one, there's Evan Neal, obviously from Alabama, as a tackle, is attractive. A lot of people think he won't get to their pick. But this kid, Ike Ekwonu from NC State, I mean, people are so high on this player. Usually when they're that high on a player, it also means he'll get drafted ahead of your pick. But I mean, if he's at the Giants pick, that is just, you take him, you don't think twice. Like one agent told me who did not sign him, said he's the most impressive prospect he's ever met, as far as how intelligent he is, how well-rounded he is.
Do they go and get him?
He could play tackle,
I mean, do you think they
guard.
go on the draft?
That's possible.
'Cause
I mean,
Shane said
he said he would move up and back. No, absolutely. But it's interesting to me too. They do have the need for that pass rusher too,
Right.
and there are pass rushers here. Now there are enough of them where maybe if that 5th pick is an O lineman, the 7th pick or a trade down to 11 or whatever it is your pass rusher. But I do find that's the second part of this I find interesting, that equation is, the O-line's this huge of an issue, but you also can't get to the quarterback. So both of those things are major needs. And so best player available, well, that might be Aquanu, but he might not even be there.
I get the feeling from talking to people around the league that there are going to be more pass rushers than we currently think that are going to end up squeezing into that top 15. So I do think with that 2nd pick, they could trade down a little bit. But either Ike Aquanu, Evan Neal, some people like Charles Cross from Mississippi State,
right.
There's a few guys that they're going to have to get one of them. And the worry is, will anybody be there at 5? Will the Jaguars take one at 1? Will the Texans take one at 3? Will the Jets? We know how much Joe Douglas love offensive linemen, even though
And they do.
They do need them.
Yeah.
They need
other picks as well.
More,
Yeah.
But I wouldn't rule them out taking one of the tags, especially if Aquanu slips to 4 and he's that impressive. I could see Joe Douglas saying, "Look, we're
Best
gonna
player
get
on the
him,
board,
and that's
let's
our
get
bookend
him." Yeah.
tackle, and we're set."
And that's what's fascinating when a team has that many needs. Like, I could make an argument for Ahmad Gardner, the Cincinnati corner. I know that the Giants have already started meeting with some receivers, some of these top receivers, like Treylon Burks they met with today from Arkansas, who is an absolute dog. I mean, this guy is a great player. Like, you could trade back and get him at 12, whatever it is. But the bottom line is, it's easy to say, obviously you take the O-lineman, or obviously you do this, and I would agree. But as far as what you need in protecting Daniel Jones, but you could make an argument for drafting any of those positions if the player's that good and the Giants need it.
Right.
And so that's where they're at. That's where teams like the Jets and the Giants are at. Right?
Well, the Jets and the Giants have 4 of the top 10 picks. So
Right, for a good reason.
Yeah. Giants have 7 picks. Brian Dable spoke today at the Combine. He said, we finally got our staff, my coaching staff together. We met last week for the first time. We're a little behind because, we just met. How does that affect this Combine? Because you kind of have to, when you scout these guys, when you're watching these players, you don't really know the feel of, what your defensive coordinator wants, what that wants. Yeah. How does that work, and how does that hurt the Giants?
I mean, I think it's exactly what you said. It's that I don't know how well this coaching staff knows each other just yet and knows exactly what they want. When you talk about the coaching staffs, like Tom Coughlin's staff or Bill Parcells' staff, they had been together for so long. I always heard them say, well, I knew that was a Coughlin player. I knew that was a Parcells player. I don't know that they know that just yet because, what might be a Mike Kafka player might not be a Brian Dable player. So they got to figure that out. They can. I don't think it's a big deal. I just think it probably takes a little more time and maybe more meetings where they'll say, instead of automatically going, that's our guy, they're going to have to discuss it a little more.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, Dable, when he was asked about Mike Kafka and hiring him, he basically said, I don't know him that well. Like, it sounds like there's a lot of getting to know to do on the offensive side of the ball. I don't know this for a fact. It's not official. Everything Dable says about play calling sounds like Kafka's calling the plays, especially because I don't think you leave Patrick Mahomes' side for an OC job if you're not getting play calling. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. But, I mean, this is a guy who was hired as a head coach because of his offensive acumen. So how is that going to mesh, and how is that going to mesh on what players they want and prefer? I think that's a great question and one that they still haven't answered yet.
It's going to be interesting.
No doubt.
That's why the Combine, it's good to be back at the Combine. It's good to, see these players, talk to coaches, see the GM.
Look how scenic it is.
Exactly.
This beautiful background we got.
Great chatting with you, Ralph Vacchiano, Pat Leonard. Appreciate it. We'll be back live in the Tailgate tomorrow. Let's talk Jets tomorrow.
Sure.
Let's do it.
Okay.
There'll be some of the same themes.
I know, right?
We'll have some of their coaches
Like
on.
we said,
No,
4 picks in the top 10.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know about the state of New York football.
Exactly.
All right. They only go up, though, right? Can only get better.
Yes.
All right. That was fun. Thanks for watching this live edition of the Tailgate from Indianapolis.